And the story of the manuscript is about the love story, not the love story. Hi guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Neha and welcome to part 2 of my recent reads wrap-up series. So in this video, I'm talking about all the books that I've read in May 2022. Just a quick recap about how the standings are so far for my best and my least favorite books of 2022. For my best books, I had added Galatea by Madeline Miller in April, and let's see what gets added in May. And for my least favorite books, Stuart Turton's The Devil in the Dark Water unfortunately landed a place in the charts for April, and let's see what gets added for May. So in May, I finished a total of 5 books. All of them have been fiction books, and all of them, surprisingly, not very surprisingly because I do tend to read a lot of women authors, but in May I read all women authors, which was very unintentional. I didn't mean that to happen, but yay, always fun. The very first book that I finished was Paradise by Toni Morrison. This is a historical fiction novel set in a fictitious town called Ruby. Now, Ruby is a small town which has a unique differentiator. It is a town made up entirely of black residents. The founding fathers had fled from their original place to escape their oppressors, and they had created Ruby. But within Ruby also there's a clear demarcation in how the purebred, pure black families are treated and how like the lighter skinned black people are treated. On the outskirts of Ruby there is an opulent mansion called the convent. Now the convent was originally a home to nuns, but also it becomes a home for troubled girls and troubled women to seek solace and to just a place for them to feel safe. The tensions arise between the town of Ruby and the convent women, and the book actually opens with the convent women being hunted down and killed by the men of Ruby, and each of the chapters are dedicated to one woman of the convent and how their lives have been intertwined with the residents of Ruby. First of all, this is my second Toni Morrison book. The first one was The Bluest Eye, and it absolutely broke my heart, but it was also so beautiful. And this one is also similar to that. The writing of this book is just so heartbreakingly brutal, but it also, in her words, there is like a quiet strength and an indomitable spirit which she paints her characters with, especially the women characters, because the amount of compassion that I felt for these women is just, it made this book for me. I could not stop thinking about the women of the convent long after I finished this book. And I absolutely loved how she chose to paint these women who were complex, grey characters, who were just women from troubled backgrounds who had demons of their own, but in the convent they all were together and they all had a singular purpose of trying to just get by life. The men of this book are scared of the women because the men of Ruby had established the town of Ruby to be a safe place for their women, for their black women, and when they see that there are women in the convent who they can't control, who they cannot manipulate as per their wish, they term them dangerous. And the equation of how that very, very rapidly evolves is just traumatic to read. Absolutely loved this, broke my heart. Whenever the author shifted the focus away from the women of the convent and of Ruby, I was itching to get back to the women and learn more about them. So that's why a little bit of a meandering book anyway, so that's why I deducted half a star for this, but I did rate this 4.5 stars out of 5, and I absolutely loved this, so do check this out. Then the next book that I finished was The ABC Murders by Agatha Christie. I read it as part of this omnibus collection. This has 4 Poirot and Hastings stories, but I read only one of them, which is The ABC Murders. So this is a Poirot plus Hastings story, wherein Poirot starts getting letters from an unknown person about how he is going to kill somebody with the letter somebody whose name starts with the letter A, in a place whose name starts with A, in a street with the name starts A. So basically it's a serial murderer who commits murders from A to whatever number of alphabets. I'm not going to reveal that. So Poirot and Hastings are trying to solve this crime, and they come across a different bunch of characters, and in the end, like with all Agatha Christie characters, there is a closed room, and there's Poirot and Hastings and all of these witnesses, and at each point of time you think it's someone else, and it actually turns out to be somebody else. So yeah, I did enjoy this book. It was a cozy Agatha Christie mystery like every other Agatha Christie mystery, until one particular character was announced, and just the setting of it kind of gave me a hint about who the murderer was and why the murders happened. And I hoped I was wrong, and I kept on reading, but unfortunately I was not wrong. I kind of spoiled it for myself, honestly, and that's why I was let down by this book. So I don't blame the book for this, but I also do a little, because to me it felt really obvious about who the murderer is and what the motive was. But until then I was really enjoying my time with this book. So yeah, unfortunately it is a good book, but I ended up spoiling it for myself, so I ended up rating this 3 stars out of 5. Then the next book that I finished was The 40 Rules of Love by Leaf Shafak. This is a contemporary / historical fiction novel. It is half set in the US and half set in Turkey. The main protagonist's name is Ella, and she is a suburban mom of 2, and she just lives a regular routine life until she joins a book agent's office, and where she comes across this manuscript written by an unknown author about the story between Rumi, the world famous poet, the Sufi poet, and Shams of Tabriz, who is his companion, longtime friend, and how their story evolves together, and how the death of Shams of Tabriz actually inspires Rumi to switch from being like a Sufi saint to actually a poet. And while Ella reads this story, she becomes enamored with Sufism, and also she gets in touch with the author, and they start their journey together. This book is a world famous bestseller, and I mean I've heard this being recommended by so many people that I was excited to pick it up, and I was also excited to learn more about Sufism and mysticism and that side of spirituality. And this book is a very good introductory course on that, because it does introduce you to Rumi. It does introduce you to how his art shifted from being like a saint, being like a leader, spiritual leader, to more of a poet. I did not like the main protagonist. I mean, Ella is just comes across as a very selfish woman. Like, I mean, I understand that she feels that spark is missing from her life, and she is a little removed from being a married woman, but I don't understand how she just delved headlong into communication with this author without any regrets. Like, I mean, she reads the 40 Rules of Love and then interprets it in a way that actually hurts everybody around her, and it felt like she didn't care that it hurt her family. So I didn't like the character very well. She just came across as a very selfish character. So I did not enjoy the contemporary fiction part of it, but for the historical fiction part of it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. That's why I rated this book 3 stars out of 5. And I was a little let down by this book. Then I finished 2 audiobooks back to back. The first one was The Christie Affair by Nina de Gramont. This, I think, is a 2022 release, and it is a historical fiction book which fictionalizes what happened in the 10 days when Agatha Christie disappeared in real life. Like, this is one of Agatha Christie's biggest mystery, because when her husband comes and tells her that he wants a divorce because he falls in love with a different woman, she takes her car and she just disappears for 10 days, and there's like a national manhunt organized by the British police, and after 10 days she turns up in like a small inn, and she claims that she can't remember anything. So this book seeks to fictionalize what happened in those 10 days when Agatha Christie disappeared, and the story is told from her perspective and also from the perspective of her husband's mistress, because in this version her story is also intertwined in Agatha Christie's story. A true gossip queen, I was looking for, some conspiracy theories, from some realistic theories on what could have happened, and this book started off on a good tangent in that aspect. It was setting the scene about Agatha Christie, her husband, her husband's mistress, and the child who was involved, and all of that. But unfortunately, it just took a leap into the unbelievable. Like, I like a good conspiracy theory which is based on some realistic aspects and some facts. And this book just, I don't know, I did not enjoy how it went on into this quite outrageous tangent, and I was a little lost with that leap. Once again, I guessed the twist, I guessed the revelation in the end, and again it was quite obvious to me. But in this one, the author was more successful in hiding it, I would say. It's just that I could not stop at one point, and I kept thinking, oh, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this, and it turned out to be that. So again, I spoiled it for myself. This time also, I have no one to blame but myself, and I take it upon me 100%. But because of that, my reading experience was ruined, and I ended up rating this only 2.5 stars out of 5, even though it started off on quite a good note, and I did like it in the beginning. So yeah. And the last book for May, and the second audiobook for the month, is Kim Ji-young, born 1982, by Cho Nam-joo. This is set in South Korea, and it tells the story of Kim Ji-young, who is just any other girl born in South Korea, who's always had to play second fiddle to the men in her life. Like, she was always overshadowed by her brother, she was always overshadowed by her male classmates, she was always overshadowed by her male colleagues. When it was time to have a child with her husband, her career had to take a back step. It could just be any other story of any other woman across the world. But there comes a breaking point in Kim Ji-young's life when she starts behaving differently, and her husband is alarmed by it, and that's where the story starts off. This book is narrated in a very stark manner, because again, I was listening to it on audiobook, so it reads like somebody's reading off somebody's diary, or like a log of incidents happening in somebody's life. And the author chooses to pepper the life story of Kim Ji-young with hard facts and statistics of gender inequality, and how women are treated in South Korea, percentage of women in the workforce, percentage of women who had to drop out because of having children, certain policy decisions taken by South Korea, stuff like that. So while you're being told about the injustices that Kim Ji-young faces throughout her life, we are also told that this really is not uncommon in South Korea, and it happens to X number of women every year or something like that. So it just creates a much more deeper impact on you when you realize that just how systemic this sort of behavior is, and also it just leaves you angry and so futile. Like, that's how it made me feel. Like, I felt helpless and I felt angry, and I also felt that this book hit very close to the bone, because even though it is set in Korea, it could easily have been in India, or it could have been in the US, or it could have been any country in the entire world. And when you realize that fact about how much inequality already exists in the world, even though we have made tremendous strides in women empowerment, there are still so many softer aspects of it that we have to deal with at the grassroots level, in our schools, in our houses, in our workplaces. It leaves you shaken, it leaves you very, very, very angry, and it leaves you helpless, and that's what happened to me with this book. It's a very short book, but it definitely leaves an impact. It definitely hit the mark for me. So definitely an important book to read, definitely a must read. It's not a light read. There are a ton of trigger warnings of discrimination, about sexism, about even racism. So do please realize that before you read this book, but it is a must read for me. Coming up to what is the best book for me, it has to be Paradise by Toni Morrison. I rated it the highest, but I absolutely fell in love with the characters of this book, and I fell in love with the writing of this book, and I acknowledge that Miss Morrison is an absolute genius with her words, and I can't wait to read more of her, which I am definitely going to do. So yeah, this has to be this goes up on the roster for the best of 2022. And talking about my least favorite book, I don't know. I mean, all the books that I read this month were okay. A couple of them were exceptional. The other three were okay. And I think it's a little more about what let me down the most. And I would probably have to give it to the 40 Rules of Life by Elif Shafak. I just did not like the character in this. I did not like the main protagonist, and it's very difficult for me to like a book if I don't like the main protagonist and the main narrator. And that's why this goes up on the roster. But this is not a bad book by any means. I'm still prefacing that, but yeah, this ends at the bottom of the stack for me. Yeah, those are all the books that I finished in the month of May 2022. If you're still watching, thank you so much. Do check out my part 1, which was my April wrap up, if you haven't already, and subscribe, like, share, comment, all of that, and I'll see you very, very soon. Bye.